In Batman's line of work, injuries are fairly commonplace. After all, he does go up against crazies, supervillains and super ninjas in hand-to-hand combat fairly regularly. Heck, he's even fought Superman and Darkseid in hand-to-hand combat. So bruises, scrapes and broken bones are a given. But since Batman is just a mere mortal, he's brushed with death on more than a few occasions. And this video is going to look at the very worst injuries he has had to date. Now, all media is going to be included, and all injuries, so long as those injuries did not lead to Batman's death. After all, death is the very worst injury a person can get, and yes, Batman has died a few times. But we are looking at the close to mortal wounds that Batman was lucky enough to survive. He loses his arm. During the sequel story, Dark Knight's Death Metal comic event, Perpetua is trying to remake the universe in her image, and the Batman who laughs becomes a god and defeats her so that he can recreate the multiverse in his image. And needless to say, while this big fight is going on, the heroes are trying to stop him by fighting the Batman Who Laughs army. And during one of the final battles with this army, Batman has his right arm cut clean off. This sadly happens off panel, and Batman takes it pretty in stride and continues to fight regardless. And then later on in the fighting, the evil King Robin cuts off his left hand. So all in all, it's not a very good fight for him. Of course, this damage isn't permanent, and after Wonder Woman gets transformed into a god, yet again, she defeats the god version of the Batman Who Laughs, and the universe is returned to a state of semi-normalcy. And all of the DC heroes and villains are returned to the state they were in before the battle took place, which of course means that Batman gets his limbs back. But it is still one of the worst injuries the Batman has endured. And he also loses his right arm and is quite badly disfigured in the movie cinematic to the video game DC Universe Online. Exactly how Batman is injured like this is not 100% clear, but during a fight with the bad guys, Deathstroke steals Wonder Woman's lasso and catches Batman in it. He then pulls him up like a piñata and hits him with his sword. The Joker sees this and takes issue with it and shoots Batman with a rocket launcher.
What's this? Nobody kills the Bat but me!
And when next we see Batman, it's in a war-torn future where Brainiac has all but conquered the Earth and Batman is leading the resistance. And Batman has severe burns on his face and has lost his right arm, which has been replaced with a fancy robot arm that shoots lasers. Now again, we don't know for sure how he got these injuries, but most likely it was caused by the rocket that the Joker shot him with. And unlike the other time when he loses his arm, this one is permanent. Cracked skull. In the Hush storyline, Batman suffers a rather severe head injury that sees him needing pieces of his skull removed from his brain, which is a pretty serious injury, I think you'll agree. This happens after one of his grapple lines is snapped and he falls from several story up straight onto the concrete. And quite frankly, it's a miracle he doesn't die. But thankfully, his childhood friend, Dr. Thomas Elliot, is basically the world's greatest surgeon, and so he is able to perform surgery and save Batman's life, because this surgeon is, quite frankly, unbelievably skilled. And Batman does have a lot of other bruises and broken bones and injuries from this, but it's the pieces of bone needing to be removed from the brain that are definitely the worst. Now, after this happens, Batman is of course meant to rest and take it easy so that he has time to recover and heal. But he doesn't, and he just goes straight out into fighting crime. In fact, in the animated film we actually get to see him fighting Superman in hand-to-hand combat, which, considering he's just had his skull fractured, is rather impressive. And instead of being crippled for life, which he should be if he was continuing to move like this with his injuries, he's absolutely fine, because he's Batman. Coma. Batman has been in a coma a few times, but perhaps the worst one was in the Harley Quinn animated TV show. After a huge fight with the Joker that sees a very large portion of Gotham destroyed, Batman breaks nearly every bone in his body, and even though he tries to use a fancy cybernetic batsuit so he can go back to fighting crime, he finds that his injuries are too severe and he can't be Batman, and instead he has to wait for his body to heal. And I think this is a testament to how severe this injury is, because, as I literally just said, when he fractured his skull and had pieces of bone removed from his brain, he still continued to be Batman with virtually no time to heal. So the fact that he cannot be Batman for weeks on end says a lot. After all, when he breaks his bones in Batman the Brave and the Bold, he just uses a fancy bat suit to overcome this limitation. And of course, that's the same thing he tried to do in the Harley Quinn show. And even though Batman the Brave and the Bold was a lighter take on the character, it still goes to show that this injury must have been so much worse if he couldn't just use technology to get over it. Now of course, Batman has broken a lot of bones over the years, including a few broken spines. Broken back. Now, Batman breaks his back a lot. In fact, he might break his back more times than any other hero in the DC universe. And he's had his back broken on more than a few occasions by Bane alone. The first time was when Bane was a relative newcomer to the DC universe, and Batman just wasn't ready for his extreme strength. So Bane is able to snap his spine quite easily. The second time, Bane is actually off of the Venom, and simply outskills Batman in a fight, something that very rarely happens. But it happens in the Rebirth Batman comics, and first Bane cracks one of his vertebrae while fighting in a prison, though Batman of course just pops that vertebrae back into place and carries on fighting crime, which is pretty much impossible, but hey, he's Batman. And later on in the story arc, The Fall and the Fallen, Bane takes Batman down again and then takes over Gotham. And of course, Bane also snaps his spine in the live-action film Batman: The Dark Knight Rises.
I was wondering what would break first. Your spirit? Oh, your body!
And in the video game Batman: Rise of Sin Tzu, if you lose a fight with Bane, he snaps your back, killing you. The same is true of the video game Batman: Arkham Asylum. And of course they have the infamous Batman line,
No, Bane. This time I break you.
and in the Batman Arkham Origins game, there are a few times within it that Bane can break Batman's back, especially if it's a killing move, or he can just reference it in a fight, doing the bat-breaking move, but not actually breaking it for real. And in the Telltale Batman video game, one of Batman's death again has Bane breaking Batman's back. In fact, Bane's broke his back so many times that Robot Chicken actually did a whole series of sketches of Bane coming in to repeatedly break his spine. It's just happened that much. However, there is one very good occasion in which Batman breaks his back and it wasn't done by Bane. In the Injustice comic book, Batman fights Superman in the Batcave. Now, as you may remember, in that game there are super pills that allow a person to get superpowers, hence why the Joker becomes bulletproof.
I should be dead. Thanks, Happy Pill.
But these pills first had to be stolen by Batman and his team, and then the pills had to be scanned and the plans uploaded via the Batcomputer. Lots of science to make it all make sense. But basically, while Batman is scanning these super pills, Superman turns up and beats the crap out of Batman, and cracks his spine in half with little to no effort. He is Superman after all. And then he interrogates Batman by pushing down on the spine and torturing Batman for information. That's right, Superman, the paragon of virtue and justice, tortures Batman for information. It's a messed up scene with an absolutely amazing moment where Alfred takes the super pill and then he nuts Superman unconscious in order to save Batman. And Alfred does this because, as we all know, he is the ultimate badass. Psychological trauma. Now, some people might not consider this to be an injury, but it very much is, and it definitely needs to be mentioned because Batman has got some truly epic PTSD. After all, you don't spend your adult life in custom battle armour fighting random criminals on the city streets if you're a picture of psychological health. Now, of course, as we all know, his biggest psychological trauma occurred when he watched his parents gunned down by a criminal when he was just a child. And technically speaking, this is probably the worst injury the Batman has ever endured. In fact, it was this injury that led to Batman being born in the first place, so it has to be on this list. And over the years, he has faced more psychological trauma than I could ever even begin to list. But perhaps the worst occasion was during the Emperor Joker storyline, in which Joker becomes all-powerful and murders and then resurrects and then murders and then resurrects Batman over and over and over again in more and more depraved and torturous ways, and it completely screws Batman up beyond all recognition. After all, one of the deaths has him eaten to death by a pack of vultures. Literally pecked and eaten to death. I mean, that's gonna scar anybody. But fortunately for Batman, Superman is a very good friend to have, as he agrees to take Batman's psychological trauma and place it on his psyche. And for some reason, Superman was able to pretty much just shake off the damage. Because he's Superman, I guess, and super therapy and processing grief and trauma at amazing speeds is one of his superpowers. At least this version of Superman can deal with this anyway. Now, Batman has also been exposed to various hallucinogenics, Joker toxins, and other mind-altering chemicals over the years, which has no doubt added to his overall mental damage, which, let's be completely honest, is quite severe at this point. And those are Batman's 5 worst injuries. There are some other pretty bad ones,